So I want to introduce Sara here. Sara is a senior designer in our Atlassian office in Austin. She's a former scientist and a former teacher, so you're in really good hands this morning. If you check out her Twitter feed, you will find a good mixture of really good science, some really interesting political issues that are going on in the world right now, and a lot of cats. So you will be in there for at least 20 minutes, I guarantee it. She's here today to talk to you about designing Stride, which is a huge talk for us today. So please welcome Sara.
So when I had to come up with a title for this talk, obviously we hadn't announced Stride yet, so this was my attempt at sort of a I see what you did there sort of title. We are definitely going to talk a lot about Stride today, but my hope is that a lot of what I'm going to say about team communication is going to apply to you whether you are a HipChat data center customer, you're using HipChat Cloud, or you're just communicating with your team and not using messaging yet at all. So like MC said, I work in the Austin office, and if you've ever been to Austin in the summer, you know that it gets really, really hot. And one day this July, my spouse and I were sitting in our house, and we looked over at each other with this sense of creeping dread because our house was getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And we went outside and we looked at our air conditioning, and the fan was not running, which in Texas in the summertime is a serious, serious problem. So we called the air conditioning repair people, and they said that the soonest they could be out was the next day, on Monday, sometime in the early afternoon. And so now we have a huge relationship question, which is who is going to go into their air-conditioned office in the morning, and who is going to stay home in the sweltering house and wait for the repair people? And so my spouse looks at me and he says, well, I have meetings. And I look at him and I said, well, I have meetings too. And so we have what looks like a standoff. We both work in downtown Austin. We both work at tech companies. We're actually right across the street from each other. And our offices are about the same size. And if you look at our meeting rooms, we even have the exact same teleconferencing software. So we look like we have a standoff. But we both know I am going to stay home. And the reason we know that is because there is a subtle difference in the communication culture of our companies. And what that is that when at Atlassian we create a meeting, by default, we automatically put a video meeting link on that meeting invitation. And at my spouse's company, they don't do that. So for me to choose to work from home at the last minute is no big deal. I just do it. All my meetings already have a number for me to call into, no big deal. For him to do it is an entire morning of logistics where he's gonna lose time at work. So I'm gonna stay home in the sweltering house, and indeed I did. Stories like this are what led Erin, one of our researchers, to put this statement in one of her write-ups about teams and how they work. And what she said is, the betterment of teams largely depends on cultural change within the organization. And as a designer, this is a great statement. It feels really powerful to me. It's also incredibly daunting because I build tools for people. I can't change your culture by just making a messaging app. It's both scary and it also feels real because it feels like people. Because the best tool in the world can't change how people talk to people. So let me give you a couple more examples about cultural change and communication culture. This is one that probably resonates with a lot of you. This is really common communication culture in companies. Email as documentation. Say you've made a decision, or somebody told you something, and it was in person. And so you just send a quick little email, and you CC everybody with just a reminder, we decided this today. And that means that later, nobody can come to you and say, I never said that, because you're like, oh no, I have an email, right? Email as the cultural record of your company of what everybody decided. Maybe that's something that you all decided. Maybe that's a rule at your company. Always follow it up with an email. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's just something that implicitly happens. You've seen everybody do it, so you do it yourself. Responsiveness outside of work hours is another thing that often happens just implicitly, by default. You join a company, and you go in and you work from 9 to 5 and you go home. And then an alert goes off. You've got a work email at 8 o'clock at night. There's your communication culture making itself known. People send communication. Maybe they send a chat message. Maybe they send an email. Maybe they're commenting on a Jira ticket. Maybe they've updated a Confluence page. Now you know that your communication culture is to work after hours or respond to communication after hours. Nobody told you that. You've seen it because people are doing it, and now you know that that's part of your communication culture. Humor and personality. This is another one that probably no one told you during your orientation, but something you absorb usually within the first couple months, maybe even the first couple weeks at a job. Are you allowed to post a funny GIF in chat? Are you allowed to have a ridiculous email signature? At Atlassian, it's part of our culture that you can put a silly job title on your business cards. When I was working on HipChat, I had HipCat Designer, and people would always tell me it was a typo. Now I have Stride Designer, all one word. You can put whatever you want. That's part of our company culture. At a lot of places, that wouldn't be acceptable. We can post funny GIFs. We do all the time. We're very silly. We're very humorous. I absorbed that in my first couple weeks. Nobody came to me and said, it's okay to be funny, right? So this is part of the company's communication culture. Now, there's another word I keep using, and another word that you heard all over the keynote, and that's team. Atlassian loves this word. We made it our stock symbol. And team is like one of those words that you use in conversation, and you're like, I absolutely know what this word means. And then a friend comes to you and they're like, well, what does that word mean? And then you find yourself at a little bit of a loss to explain the word, right? Like, I can define team, I think, right? I could tell you who's on my team, I think. And this concept of teams is so important to us and so integral to what we do at Atlassian that we have people who study teams. They go out, they look in the academic literature, and they find out what we know about teams already, what people at universities have found about teams, and more importantly, they go out and they talk to users of our products, like you, and they find out how your team works and communicates. Not just how you use our products, although we definitely do that as well. And if you haven't visited our design feedback area, you definitely should. But we also just want to talk to you about how do you work? That's often one of my first questions is how do you work with your team? Like, don't talk to me about messaging yet. Just talk to me about your team. And so a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is from wonderful summaries that Aaron Howard and David Simon, two of our researchers, wrote up. I couldn't give this talk without them. And a lot of that work is trying to figure out just what is a team? Like, what is a team? We call a sports team a team. So maybe that's a team. But is a group of surgeons working on a patient a team? What about construction workers building a building? A police force? A comedy troupe? A band? Or a group of kids building a sandcastle? Which of those are teams? Do we even know? David found this definition of teams that has 5 parts, and I actually really like this definition. During the keynote, someone mentioned a meaningful common purpose, and I think that's a key point of a team. If you're all together and you don't know what you're all doing, you're probably not a team. But specific performance goals is another piece of being a team. So what are you even trying to accomplish? And how are you gonna know you got there? It's not just we want to do this big thing, but specifically, how are we going to know we got there? A mix of complementary skills sounds really important to a team. And this is one I like because it immediately makes me think of the band example. A band is a perfect mix of complementary skills, right? If you had 5 singers, you may or may not have a band, but then maybe you do. Maybe an a cappella group is a team, right? You have a shared sense of how work gets done. So you know how you move your project, whatever it is, that purpose, you know how it gets done. And then you all have mutual accountability. If somebody on your team is not accountable for success in whatever it is you're trying to do, are they even on your team? So this is part of what we're trying to figure out at Atlassian, by talking to all of you, by learning what people know about teams, is what even is one? Because how can we help you be successful if we don't actually know what it is? And identifying teams is often really messy. So if I ask you who your team is, right now off the top of your head, you're probably picturing maybe like 5 to 8 people. But then if you start to think about it for a second, what about those other people that you talk to pretty often, that you still really need to talk to pretty often to get stuff done? Then maybe there's this other peripheral group of people. It gets pretty messy. This is actually a whiteboard drawing that Erin drew when she was trying to diagram the way people were talking about their teams in some of her research. So there's you in the middle, and then there's like that core group. For me, that's Stride design. That's the other designers on Stride. But then I also have the product managers on Stride. I have to talk to them all the time. And what about the developers on Stride? And then I have the global Atlassian design team. They're pretty important to me. And then there's people who work in the ecosystem, who work on add-ons. They're pretty important to me. And then it's just circles all over the place. Who's my team? It kind of depends on what I'm doing. So it gets really, really complicated, and it's messy. So what's my point here? My point is that at the end of the day, we're designing Stride. We're designing a communication tool for teams. And so our design challenge on my team is, how do we foster effective team communication in this product? Knowing that teams are messy, knowing that it's really hard to identify exactly who is on a team. We probably can't guess for you right now. How do we do this? Knowing that culture is a really important part of your team, knowing that the culture of your communication is critical. What do we do? So what we do is we take these academic insights, these things, these little nuggets of information that we know about teams, and we transform those into a design challenge for ourselves. So here's a little piece of information. We know that teams that have high performance, teams that do really well, have frequent high energy communication. What do I mean by high energy communication? I mean that often they're in the same room, there's a lot of body language, they're connected, right? High energy communication meaning that you're frequently either in the same room, you're on a video call, you're there. Well, that's kind of a rough insight for people who are trying to build a messaging tool that has a lot of text in it, right? So my challenge is that I need to make it quick and easy to interact, and I also need to add that feeling of energy to digital communication, because the reality of the modern workplace is that not everybody is going to be in the same place at the same time. That's just not how we work anymore. People are distributed all over the globe. The reality is that we can't say everybody's got to be in the workplace in the same time at the same meeting because, well, that's just the better way to communicate. Like, I can't do that. But I can provide you a tool that does the next best thing. So that's our goal as a design team. So the first part, to make it quick and easy, is that I know video calls are important, so let's make it quick and easy. So we've put this video button in the sidebar in Stride, and we've made it really easy to jump on a video call. Could we make it faster? Maybe. This is just round 1. But this is just a small detail that says, hey, you know what? It should be really easy if I'm having a chat in a group room, or I'm talking one-on-one with somebody, to say, you know what? Let's just go to video. We know video is a quicker, easier, more energetic way for us to communicate. Let's just go there. I shouldn't have to open up another app and set up a call and da-da-da. I just hit the button and I hit join and I'm on call. We should also make it really easy for you to start a new conversation. All you have to do is hit plus. And we've got more little pluses. Now we've got one right by rooms and one right by people. And all you have to do is hit the plus, type in a few letters, and you're off to a new conversation. This is something we had a lot of insight about, is that people wanted to just get there as fast as possible. We've also added profile cards. So if somebody is in a conversation with you and you just have to, and you're thinking, you know what, I actually want to talk to this person. They've popped up. They've said something relevant to my work. And I really want to find out what's going on with them. I want to know what they do here. I want to actually just jump into a quick chat with them and say, hey, like, we should get together. All I have to do is click on their name or their mention name, and this profile card pops up that lets me know what they do here, Where are they? Are they available right now? And most importantly, it gives me a quick call to action to chat with them. So I don't have to go and search for them and go through an entire workflow to talk to them. So I also want to make this human. I want to add that energy back to digital interactions. So one thing that's missing when you're on a video call is that body language. And I don't know how many of you have ever been on a video call where somebody's just talking and talking and talking, and you really want to talk, but you're missing that thing that you can do in person where you're like, and they're not looking at your little thumbnail, so they don't notice that you want to talk, and so you're just like, well, I guess I'll just watch you talk on video. That sounds great. So one thing that we have in Stride Video is we have this little raise hand button that you see me pointing at here in this GIF. And what that does is that alerts the person on the other side that you want to talk. It just pops up a little alert for them. This is Sara would like to talk. It's just a little way of adding that body language that's missing to a video call. Are there more ways we could do this? Yeah, absolutely, but this is just the first one. So these are sort of ways to close the gap between being far away in a video call and those physical things that you get when you're in the same room. We also want to add emotion to text communication, because the reality is a lot of times you're still typing into a chat. So this is where that rich text formatting comes in. An emoji. I know some people don't like emoji, but I personally am an enormous fan of emoji because they do let you add tone. There is a purpose to them. So here I'm able to format a message. I'm able to add a quote where it's clear that I'm quoting. I'm able to add emoji. You can clearly see at a glance that I'm pretty happy in this message. I'm able to bold things. I'm able to add italics, and that gets it a little closer to how I talk. It's not all the way there, but it's closer to how I would say this. It brings it up just a little bit into what it's like to talk to me. And that can actually add a decent amount of humanity to what's basically just a text conversation. I can also add media, drop in a GIF, bring a little bit of my quirkiness to this conversation. So here's another research insight that we have, which is that successful teams engage equally among all their members, both in groups and on the side. So this is one of those things that might be a little bit counterintuitive, especially if you are, say, managing a team. Side conversations are useful. They just are. You have to have side conversations for your team to get stuff done. So if I were to take a group of people and I were to diagram all of the connections between people, it shouldn't just be from one leader out to everybody. It should actually be every individual talking to every other individual. People need to talk to each other as a group and one-on-one. So when you see people having side conversations, yeah, in a meeting that can be disruptive, but you don't want to shut that down entirely. It's important for people to just say, hey, let me talk to you real quick about this thing, and not say always talk in a chat room, but enable people to talk one-on-one. So the way that we would interpret this on Stride design is that we want everyone to engage in rooms, direct messages, and video calls, not just the talkative person, or not just the person in a leadership position. So the way that we might do this is when we first have you start our product. The first few people on your team to use the product are really, really important people, mostly because they create a lot of the first rooms. And so what we can do for you in a product like Stride is encourage you to create a few different kinds of rooms. Because once that foundation is laid, people get the idea, oh, I can create my own room. I can create rooms of all sorts of kinds. And then your team grows and has a lot of different types of places to talk. So you're not just stuck in one room where then somebody gets frustrated because they're like, well, this conversation is not relevant to me. It's all about this. And this is just, I just want to talk about engineering and you guys are talking about design. You can create more than one room. And so we want to set the pattern for that. We want to set you up for success by helping you create more than one kind of room right out of the gate. We also want to encourage you to talk to people directly. So for those first few users, we would go ahead and open up the people that they invited in their sidebar to chat. So rather than making you invite somebody and then turn it around and make you have to open up a chat and talk to them, we'll go ahead and put them in the sidebar so that you can remember, hey, this is a person you clearly thought was worth talking to because you invited them. Go ahead and talk to them. It's a small suggestion, just plants the idea in everyone's head, go ahead and talk to somebody. It's not hard to do. It should be easy. All you need to do is click on them. And with video, like I said before, you can easily click on the sidebar, but when you do, we're also going to drop a little card in the chat view, like you see at the bottom, that lets everyone in the room know that there's a meeting going on and that you might want to join, with a little bit of context about what it's about. So it's only one click there, and we also give you a little bit of context so you know, hey, that's a meeting I think I should be in. So here's another research insight, that successful teams, especially successful creative teams, are exploratory, and they reach out beyond their team. So what this means is that you have a few people on your team, or even better, your whole team, is good about talking to people outside your team. So rather than just hanging out in your chat room and just talking to people in your team, they're really good about going out and talking to people in other parts of the company that might have something relevant to your product or your project. It might be not immediately related to the thing that you're doing, but it might just spark an idea in your head. This is where innovation comes from. So the way that we think about this in Stride is that we need to enable the discovery of rooms and people that are discussing relevant topics to you. This is something we are really just getting started on. We don't have all the answers for this yet, but we know that it's critical. We know that it is really, really important for us to be able to surface to you rooms and people that you might be interested in. For example, rooms that have a lot of people that you often talk to in, but you're not in. Or a person that a lot of people you know talk to, but you're not talking to. We know that's important. It's not something we're doing yet, but we definitely know that you probably need that. But one thing we can do now is we can surface for you things from our integrations. So if you often work on a Jira product, or in a Jira project, we can set up integrations where you get information about that Jira project flowing into the room for your team. So you know that something is changing on there, somebody is discussing something on there, and you know that you can go interact with it. There's nothing stopping you from setting up a Jira integration, a Bitbucket integration, a Confluence integration for related teams that's going to bring in information to your room without you having to go and monitor that all the time or get emails. This is one of my favorite research insights, which is that unstructured social time is critical to team performance. This is one of those things that people balk against because it just seems counterintuitive on face. But it is one of the things that shows up in the data over and over again. Social time is critical. And not just personal break time, actual social time. So like all of the people on the team being able to be social. And not, after work, we're all gonna go have a mandatory fun happy hour. But just like literally that you can all go socialize in a like unstructured, not mandatory fun human way. That's why I love this, because it's natural. So, what do we want to do on Stride? We want to create digital spaces for you to be social. Because you know what you do during social time? You make those connections that allow you to do that exploratory connecting through your work. Because how are you going to know who you need to talk to? How are you going to make those connections? Why would you randomly reach out to somebody that you don't normally talk to and be like, by the way, do you have anything going on that affects me? No, right? But for example, like MC, who's running this track, she works with Service Desk. Like, we don't talk very often, but last night we had a really cool conversation about Service Desk and Stride because we were having a social conversation. It works, right? That's how you make those connections. So you need that social time. So you want to create digital spaces for social interaction. How are we going to do that? One is that we want to think about telepresence. We at Atlassian have a really wonderful asset, which is the Trello team, because Trello is very remote. A large percentage of the Trello team is a remote team. And so they have a lot of those cultural communication practices that support good remote work. And that is something that we can learn from. The Stride video team also has a lot of background in understanding telepresence. So what that means is just being on video all day, which sounds super weird, I know. Like, for me, that's so awkward, and it just makes me cringe inside. But then I think about, like, there are people sitting across from me who are staring at my face all day anyway, and like, why is it any different for me to be on video and have somebody look at my face all day? I have to work through it, and I know a lot of other people do. But basically the idea that, like, I can be virtually present with somebody and be able to make offhand jokes and things like that the same way that I can be physically present with someone. And that's something that we can think about with Stride Video. There's no reason we can't. We also create space in the product to have a little bit of flair. These are really tiny details, but they're important. For example, you can set your custom app mention. Here are a few that I really like. A couple of the people on my design team have silly ones. I have a silly one. Someone that I work with all the time is Pizza. One of our grad developers, his name is Weston, and he is North by Northweston, which just pleases me every time I type it. One of our product managers is JLo. And it's one of those little things that lets you get a little window into someone's personality, or their nickname, perhaps. And when you type it, it just kind of gives you a giggle. It's not a big deal. If your company could just set everybody as first name, last name, it's fine. But it's also a place for you to show a little flair. We also have the custom status messages where you can say, you know, I'm working from home, or I'm focusing on this. But if you have nothing particular to say something silly. It's something that my team does a lot. There are some examples over there of things that we had sitting just at one time, like miss my oatmeal. He was working from home. Impossibly hot cheese gas. I don't even remember what it was, but it was an inside joke. This is just my team being silly and showing a little bit of our personality so that if somebody else were to come and look at my team, they would know that we are a little bit ridiculous. And that's something that your team can do as well. Another thing that we can do is we can promote the concept of a water cooler type chat, which is a chat room that's just for being silly and just for being social. Here I'm showing Austin Social, which is a very real Stride room where we just talk about whatever. It's everybody in the Austin office just talking. Sometimes we ask questions about Austin, sometimes we ask questions about the office, and sometimes we talk about what Austin coaster people have on their desk and do they want to trade. There is no quote unquote work purpose to this room. It's just a room where everybody in the Austin office can bond. And this is something that in Stride, we can help people set up. We can put these in there by default. We can suggest you create one. And that way we can create a social space for your team where you automatically have a place to take those sorts of conversations. Another research insight, which is a little bit difficult to think about sometimes, which is about constructive conflict. We know that constructive conflict fosters understanding and purpose. If everyone on your team agrees all the time, you're probably not pushing very hard, or people are lying, because most of the time, people don't agree, right? You need that constructive conflict. You want it, right? You want constructive feedback because you want the thing that you're building or doing to be as good as possible. But you also don't want to be fighting, because that's hard, right? And it makes work stressful. So you want to have a constructive space. How do we do that? We want to provide tools and scaffolding for you to have productive and nuanced conversations. That's hard to do in a text chat. So one thing we can do is we can provide the actions and decisions that they showed in the keynote. Here what you're seeing is people being very clear about a decision that's been made. I don't know how many of you have experienced being in a chat where people are discussing something for a really long time, sometimes pretty passionately, and you're not sure if you got to a decision. You're not sure if the consensus that the team seemed to reach was really a consensus or maybe not a consensus, but you feel weird about asking. Who knows? But here, you can reach a decision. You can document that decision, and that way your other team members who don't want to read through that long discussion can just say, aha, they got there, and this is the decision. And here are the tasks that are the output of that decision. I don't need to read all this discussion unless I want the context. I just need to look at the decision and look at the actions. And everybody who is involved in that decision knows, hey, this is what we decided. Or if they don't agree, they can say, actually, I'm still not on board. I need to revisit this decision. It gives you a framework to have those discussions instead of an uncomfortable, I think we got there kind of moment. Another thing that we can do is with emoji. Is emoji give you a way to indicate tone? Because I don't know how many of y'all have ever been in that moment where you're reading an email like a few different times and you're like, did they mean it like this? Or are they being rude, right? Emoji give you a way to indicate tone. Same thing with some of the rich text editing. You can see here how the addition of emoji very clearly indicates when I'm being a jerk and when I'm not. Right? It's an extreme example, and I get that, but it actually really does help. One of the things that happens in a global company, I communicate with Sydney pretty often. So we are not remotely on the same time zone. Like right now, I'm kind of finishing my day just when they're starting. Like literally 6 p.m. and there isn't there 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. the next day. So we have a lot of handoff kind of conversations, which are occurring when I'm done, right? And a lot of times I use a smiley face to indicate that I am definitely being nice because my tone is not always where it needs to be. And these kinds of things enable you to make sure that your message is understood very clearly. Another insight, which I think is clear to everyone, is that there's still a me in team. Everybody knows this. You still have to get work done. Messaging and communicating takes away from your time to go to your desk and put your head down and get stuff done, right? And that's where we have to eliminate noise and place value on getting work done. On Stride, we are not concerned with the metric of how many messages you sent today because that does not correlate to us with the success of our product. The success of our product is about how we enabled you to get stuff done. That for you might be 2,000 messages today, or it might have been 2. That doesn't correlate. So for us, it's about, did you get your stuff done? And so that's where focus mode came from. The idea that you needed to turn down the volume so that you can get things done, and more than that, so that you can express to your team that you're working. Because busy feels a little gross. It feels hard to set a busy status to people who might be an authority figure for you, or to people on your team who might be trying to reach you. Busy sometimes feels like the wrong tone, right? Like if my boss came over to me and was like, hey, Sarah, I have a question. And I was like, I'm busy. Like that doesn't feel like something I would do in real life. It does, I might say, I'm actually focusing on this thing. Can I talk to you afterwards? That feels more like what I would say to somebody that I work with and care about and communicate with. And so that's where the essence of focus mode came from, is the idea that I would say to somebody that I work with and respect, hey, I'm focusing right now, can I talk to you in a little bit? Not busy, right? Here's another insight, which is that visualizing communication is really helpful for teams. So if I could take those things, like the energy of your conversations, how engaged you are in your conversations, and how much you reach out to other teams, and visualize those, that would be awesome. And I really wish I had a slide after this one to show you how we're doing that, but we're not yet. But we know that it's really, really, really important. It's something that I think we would love to do. This is something that would really empower teams, is to be able to show you how you communicate and identify opportunities for you. So my last challenge to you is to be the culture change you seek on your team. Whether you start using Stride, or you're using HipChat Data Center, or you're using any other kind of messaging tool, because you're all communicating, right? You're all sending emails, you're all communicating on Jira tickets, you're all writing Confluence pages, you're all in Service Desk, you're doing something. You're using some Atlassian product. And in those Atlassian products, you're communicating with your team. And you're establishing your communication culture, either explicitly, by talking to each other about how you communicate, or implicitly, by the things you do default. So what I'm asking you to do is to follow the Atlassian value of being the change that you seek, and think about the communication culture that you're setting up, and change it. Add energy, engagement, and exploration to the way that you're working with your teams. And when you do, Stride will be there as a tool that supports you. Thanks.